Okay, so if everybody could kindly just mute their mics so we don't pick up background noise, and we'll let Lorraine take over. Lorraine Hightower is with us this evening, and she is a dyslexia advocate and a consultant. And she's going to be talking with us tonight about some advocacy steps that parents can take.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, Susan and Tristan. It's really a pleasure to be with you ladies and your community. I love being in the company of like-minded organizations, and I know we're on a similar mission to, really help students who have disabilities kind of get the skills that they need so that they can thrive in school as well as in life. So I love the opportunity to be with you, and I just want to share for the participants, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us. And if you do have questions, we'll either answer them along the way. I think Tristan's going to kind of monitor the chat if you have a question or you want to raise your hand, or you can save them to the end. We'll certainly have an opportunity for questions at the very end. But as Susan said, I am a certified dyslexia advocate and consultant, and my journey in this work and this passion of mine really began with my own son. My son, when he was in first grade, he was struggling to learn and master basic academic skills like reading and spelling and even writing. And his teacher would tell me he's so bright and he's capable, and we're not really sure what's going on with him. And since he was in first grade and he was my only child, I really didn't do anything about that. So then in second grade, when his teacher started sharing concerns again about the fact that while my son seemed bright and capable, he still was not able to write letters, and he was struggling with basic academic skills that he was supposed to be learning at this stage, that led to a whole host of concerns. And as a parent, while I tried to get my son evaluated and get some help through the school system, that really wasn't possible because the school district at that time told me, we're not really worried about him. He's a good kid. He doesn't seem to have any obvious issues. So I went off and got all of this private evaluations and testing and data. And I was so excited as a mom when I finally knew that, my son was actually dyslexic and that he had dysgraphia and he had ADHD. And I fully expected when I brought all of this information back to the school team that they were going to receive this information with open arms and, do whatever they could to help my son learn how to read, write, spell, and as he got older, do multiplication facts. But unfortunately, what I found when I brought all of this information back to my school team was a little bit of, a shock and an awe at all of this information because my son looked like a functional student. And at that time, I was actually told, Mrs. Hightower, we don't even use the word dyslexia in our school district. And we don't even distinguish dyslexia apart from all of the other specific learning disabilities. And I will never forget the conversation that I had with our school district's special education director when she told me, this just isn't a thing in our school district. And I know it's a thing for your son, and I appreciate that he has dyslexia, but this is not something that our teachers are trained in or that they know how to help students with. And his elementary school teacher actually said, I think your son might be the only student with dyslexia in our entire school. So that was a unique experience. And I will say that that was over 11 years ago, but it certainly did put me on a path of trying to affect local and systemic change throughout the state of Virginia, which is where I live. And I quickly became aware that many parents were struggling with their own children who were trying to learn these basic academic skills, and they were having a hard time communicating their concerns to their school district and really getting the support and services that they need. So while I am delighted to have been a part of affecting systemic change in my local school district, as well as across the state of Virginia, I personally feel that what is happening right now, and we've just passed some wonderful legislation in Virginia on revamping our entire approach to reading that includes a structured literacy approach, a lot of this feels like too much, too late. And when I say that, I'm really referring to the National Reading Panel that did a wonderful report back in 2010 that identified, why reading and literacy should be a concern for our country and how we were underperforming and all of the things that it would actually take to make our world and the world of children who were not reading a little bit better. And as we know, not all of that has been implemented, and school districts and school teams are still trying to figure out, how best to serve these kids. So tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about what you as parents and community members can do to try to make things better for your child. And I do want to also acknowledge, as we start our discussion tonight, this is unprecedented times. We're starting our third year of a pandemic. And as I like to say, it's not just a medical pandemic, it is also an educational pandemic. We have kids who have been out of school. Some kids have never been in school. They spent their entire time on virtual learning for maybe grades 1 and 2. We have some students who are still learning from home because maybe they're immunocompromised or they can't go back into the traditional school building. And we definitely know that all students have suffered, most students, I should say, unless they've had private help and support, have suffered some degree of learning loss, or that they have gaps in their knowledge. And we also know that while parents are celebrating the fact that kids are back in school, schools are faced with real challenges. We have a teacher shortage that's happening right now. We have teachers who don't understand how to meet all of the needs of their students, because now they have kids at many different levels of learning. They have some kids who had private support and are on an accelerated path. They have other kids who have a huge gap, and it really doesn't feel possible to differentiate and personalize the instruction as much as their students may need. We also have teachers who have challenges with technology. We have teachers who are dealing with social and emotional concerns of their own. And as I said, we have kids who have, some concerns about being back in school, being around others. And so all of these factors are affecting student learning. And what we also know to be true is if we have students who have disabilities, and the population of students that I serve have dyslexia, which is obviously a challenge with, it's a language processing disorder that affects their ability to read and spell. These students are especially struggling, and many of them are in real trouble right now, because not only do they have a content gap, but they might actually not have the ability to do some of these basic academic functional skills like reading and spelling and writing, or math calculations. So we know that adults need to help them, and parents need to, or at least it's my hope that parents will become, through presentations like this, a little bit more informed and feel empowered to actually help their students if they do have these concerns. So tonight I'm going to be presenting the top 5, as I call them, the top 5 advocacy action steps that I really believe all parents should know about and should utilize when they're trying to advocate for their own kids in the public school system. And I do want to say that the good news is, from a federal perspective, even though we are in a pandemic, even though we have this unusual, non-traditional learning environment again, the good news is that the federal expectation has never changed. So that when I am speaking about the federal expectation, I'm really talking about the obligation for school districts to provide a free and appropriate public education. And this is for students who have disabilities. So for tonight's presentation, I'm pretty much talking about students who have been identified under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or maybe they have an IEP. But even if you have a student who has a 504 plan under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, those regulations haven't changed either. So I think this should be really good news for parents to know that from the onset of this pandemic to right now, tonight, to this presentation, the federal expectation has not changed. So when parents have concerns, and often we have parents reach out to us via email, phone calls, presentations like this, and they say, something is not right for my child. Either the school team won't meet with me, they won't evaluate, they won't identify, or they have an IEP, but it's not meeting all their needs, or they're not meeting, they're not making meaningful progress. Parents say, what do you recommend that we do? And I know that they do not like this answer. I am well aware that parents do not like to be told, you're going to have to reconvene the school team. But truthfully, if you want something to happen for your child that involves their education, my number one advice is you're going to have to work collaboratively with the school team throughout this process. And so my first recommendation is you're going to need to convene the school team. And this might look differently for each family, depending upon where you are in the special education process. So for example, if you now have just become concerned about your child and believe that they might have a disability of some type and you're just making a referral, you're going to be asking to convene a school-based team to talk about your child and your concerns. And will the school district do an evaluation to better understand what your child's strengths and weaknesses are? Or you might be convening a school team to actually make an eligibility decision for your child. Or you might be asking to reconvene the child's IEP team, or as we said, the 504 committee, to look at the existing goals or services or accommodations, because maybe now you believe that those should be different than what you agreed to a year ago, or maybe even, a couple of months ago, depending upon your child's development and ability to kind of make progress. So that is number one. And I will say, I do recommend that when parents are asking to reconvene the school team, that you make this request in writing so that you have a date and a time stamp that goes along with that request. That if you don't get a reply in a reasonable amount of time, which is typically about 10 to 15 business days, that you make that request again and that you CC or carbon copy, the building administrator, if they're not in the loop about your concerns. And if you're talking directly to the building administrator, then maybe you need to carbon copy the special education supervisor or the procedural support liaison for your school district. But too often I hear parents say, I tried to reconvene the team, I didn't get a response, or I made a phone call and now a month has gone by. And I really want you to know that this is something you should be assertive about. That if you have a concern as a parent, your first step is going to be that you need to get that team together so that they can hear your concern and you can start to have a productive conversation about what should happen. So as part of reconvening the team, I do recommend that all parents need to get their data together. And when we talk about data, we're really talking about information from a variety of sources. So for example, if you are bringing the team back together because you don't believe your child is making meaningful progress on their IEP goals, you want to look and see, well, what information do I have as parents? Do I have an IEP progress report that says how my child is doing? Do I have information from a private tutor or interventionist who says how my child is doing? Do I have my own parent observation data that I can share with the school team? Or maybe I need to go to this meeting and I need to actually ask for additional data and additional skill assessments so that we have a very accurate baseline for my child's present levels. But this is another advocacy step that I feel like parents often overlook, is that as they head into these meetings, we're all busy, we put the date on our calendar, we show up in person or we click into a Zoom meeting, but we really haven't done any preparation beforehand to outline what are our specific concerns, what data or evidence, for lack of a better word, do we have to kind of substantiate those concerns with the school team and let them know why this is really important to us, and what do we need to ask them for if we don't have enough data? What are we asking them to kind of look into further so that we can make data-informed decisions about your child? That's really the whole goal in getting this information, is so that you're not guessing with the school team, you're getting the information that you need to guide your decision making. So as you work with your school team, I do want to encourage you not to underestimate the importance of parent input and parent participation. So the federal regulations that I was speaking about earlier, which is the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, they actually say in the regulation that parents are a critical component of a child's IEP team. So they are a mandatory participant, and that their input has to be considered as part of making decisions about their child. And recently, we were pleasantly surprised to see here in Virginia, the Virginia Department of Education kind of followed a trend with a lot of other states and came out with guidance that said, when the pandemic was occurring at its height and all students were in distance learning, they actually came out with a guidance document that said parents' observation and data should actually be concerned as much, if not more, than school participants, because they made the point that parents actually have more direct access to the child than the school teachers and team at that time. So I think it just emphasizes for me and for hopefully all of you, the importance of realizing that you are a meeting participant as a parent, and that what you have to say is important, and that the school team should want to hear, what your concerns are and work with you to hopefully resolve them. So I do know that for many parents, it can be very frustrating when we go to these meetings to kind of cut through all of, that's why I have our little pair of scissors there, cut through all of the noise and really focus on the solution that we're trying to get to. But we also do recommend that parents try to advocate from a place of information and data and not emotion. So when you come to these school teams with your data, with your concerns, we really encourage parents, you're asking for a solution. You're asking to be a part of the conversation, part of the decision making. You want to be brainstorming what are all the possible solutions, which may, in the case of a student with dyslexia, involve what type of curriculum is going to be used, what type of intervention, who's going to be doing it, what is their background training and knowledge. Really want to be asking questions that are solution focused and spending less of your time kind of talking about all of the history of everything that has gone wrong. Because what we have found, again, when we talk with parents is they'll say, we were only given an hour. And by the time we kind of brought the team up to speed on everything that has happened and what's not working for our child, we really actually had only a couple of minutes to talk about the solutions. So we do suggest that you can give your couple of bullet points on what you believe the problem is, but then we encourage parents to spend the rest of the time at that meeting looking at the data, looking at the all of the evidence, as we said, that speaks to your child's unique needs and what you hope will happen as the solution. So action advocacy step number 2, which parents don't often know they have this option, is to invite others to your conversation. And so what I mean about that is whether it is bringing a friend to your school meeting, bringing your spouse, asking for professional support through an advocate or an attorney, or maybe it's simply that your child's been working with a private tutor or a speech language interventionist, and you want that person to come with you to the school meeting. Or you might be in an IEP discussion and feeling like, everyone here is really nice and they have great intentions, but I just don't feel like they have the background knowledge and experience to make decisions about my child's IEP in terms of goals, services, and accommodations. So within just about every school district that I've ever worked in, there are curriculum specialists. There are specialists from the Office of Special Education Instruction that are supposed to be educated on the unique needs of all students with disabilities. And parents can certainly request for these individuals to join their meetings and conversations. Now, keep in mind, it is a request. There are certain members that are required to be there for school meetings, but too often parents don't believe that they actually have the opportunity or that they can say, I would like these individuals to be present for my child's meeting. Can you please confirm their attendance? And in some cases, you might want the school counselor there. You might want a school psychologist to weigh in. You may want an occupational therapist or an assistive technology specialist. And so I want to let parents know that it is certainly your right to ask for input and participation from all of these district representatives, because really the whole purpose of the meeting is to determine what does your child need and what does the district need to do so that they're provided with a free and appropriate public education. So, again, I have found more often than not, school districts are receptive and will do their best to include anybody that the family asks to attend important meetings. And in terms of choice, I do want to say that sometimes, depending upon the nature of the conversation, it is helpful to ensure beforehand that you have the appropriate decision makers in that meeting. So for example, if you are a parent who has had a child on an IEP, let's say for reading and spelling concerns because they are dyslexic, and maybe they've had this IEP for years, but during the pandemic, you're realizing, oh my gosh, not only are they not making progress, maybe they've actually regressed, or maybe they haven't received all of their services. And so you now want to go to the school meeting and you want to talk about what type of compensatory or recovery services are available for your child. Well, that might be the type of a conversation that the average school team is really not prepared to have with you, or maybe they've been told by their district, we actually are not allowed to make those decisions. If a parent wants to talk about recovery or compensatory services, you need to make sure that you have a special education supervisor there. So again, depending on what your concerns are, we encourage parents to say, who do I need to be at the table who has the authority to make the decisions that I'm going to be asking for about my child? And so it does take a little bit of homework on the front end in terms of asking and preparing and confirming attendance. But what I think parents will find is that often the meetings are a lot more productive and they get the desired outcome that they want for their student if they have the right individuals as part of that whole conversation. So advocacy action step or action item number 3 is considering obtaining additional data. And what I mean by this is you might come into these conversations and realize we don't have all of the information that we need. Just yesterday, I was a part of an eligibility conversation, and we realized that while the school district had done their evaluation, they actually had not evaluated everything that we thought they were going to be evaluating. So we couldn't actually make an informed eligibility decision for that child. So the family and the school district agreed that they were going to go off and get some additional, more comprehensive data in the areas of phonological processing and rapid naming skills. And we're going to reconvene the eligibility team to make an informed eligibility decision at a later date. And so that's just one example of coming to a meeting and realizing, you know what, we actually need additional information and data before we continue this meeting. This might also happen in the context of an IEP meeting. You might be asked to attend an IEP meeting. You might think you're going to go in there and revise the child's goals and the services, and yet maybe you haven't met with the team for anywhere from 9 months to a year. And when you get into the meeting and you're talking about present levels of performance for that child, the school team doesn't have any data or information to share with you. So at that point, you may, work through the parts of the IEP that you can so that you can use the time as best as possible, but you may actually have to say to the school team, it doesn't seem like we have all of the information that we need on all of my child's goals. We don't even really know what their baseline is. So is it possible for you to get that information, collect that additional data, and then we'll come back together as an IEP team and use that information to determine what my child's new goals, services, and maybe even accommodations should be. So parents should, again, feel empowered if they're in these meetings and they don't believe we have, or the school team has all of the information that they need to make a decision about their child, to ask them to get additional data. And we're going to talk in a minute about how parents can get additional data outside of the school district as well. I also want to encourage parents to reach out and have parent-teacher conferences with other teachers if they feel that would be beneficial to uncovering information about their child's strengths and weaknesses. So just because there are, certain teachers or certain administrators, individuals who show up at your child's team meeting or school-based meeting, doesn't mean that you can't reach out to your child's other teachers and ask for an opportunity to talk with them about what they're observing in that classroom. And this is typically for older students who have multiple teachers, but parents should absolutely feel comfortable reaching out and saying, we have an IEP meeting coming up in a month, and I'd love to meet with you briefly to better understand how my child is doing in your class, what you see they're struggling with. Again, we mentioned private tutors. So if your child is working with a private tutor, or maybe even an occupational therapist or a speech language therapist, and they have information that would be helpful to the IEP team, you are going to want to get that information before you convene that school meeting. So in the case of a private tutor, I will often say to parents, it would be really helpful if they have any pre-test or post-test or pre-lesson or post-lesson information that we can share with the school team. Or perhaps there's a certain scope and sequence of what the child is learning and working with the private tutor that we want to disclose and share with the school team so that we can make sure the child's IEP and the goals are all kind of working towards the same outcome, and that we don't have competing instruction going on, which is often a challenge when you have an outside professional working with a school team, also delivering an intervention. So again, this is very important, and it might sound simple, but when parents have all of this information at their fingertips when they're in a school meeting, the outcome is vastly different from just showing up and hearing what the school team proposes. And I will add, students can participate in school-based meetings at a certain age. Parents often ask me, what is the appropriate age that you think my child should go to these meetings? And the regulations really recommend age 14 on up. And what I found with my own son is that, parents are the best judge of their child and whether or not they think it would be meaningful for them to go to a meeting, or if they think it would be more harming from a social and emotional standpoint. But when you feel your child is ready, they don't have to attend the entire meeting. They can go for the first 10 minutes of the school meeting. They can talk about what's working well for them, what's not working well for them, and what they hope the school team or committee will consider. And then they can be excused to go, on back to class. So parents can help their child navigate self-advocacy and meeting participation in whatever way they are most comfortable. And it does evolve over the years. And also, we want our children to become competent and empowered self-advocates at some point, whenever you feel they're ready as parents. So advocacy action step number 4, I've kind of hinted towards this, but if you are a parent that believes that as a result of the pandemic, your child either did not get all of the all of the special education services that they were entitled to, that were outlined in their IEP, or maybe they received the services or some kind of hodgepodge hybrid of those services, and they didn't make meaningful progress towards their IEP goals, then I want you to know that it's certainly well within your right to ask the school team to consider COVID recovery or compensatory education services for your child. And whenever I mention this to parents, I think it brings up a lot more questions than answers, because these terms are relatively new and parents don't know, how do you even find out if you're eligible for recovery or compensatory services, and what would they even look like, and who are the decision makers around them. And we recently did, I think one of our most popular blogs that we did during the pandemic was a flow chart for parents, and you're welcome to use this QR code here to download our flow chart on compensatory services if you have questions about this, because it is something that parents want to know more about, and how do they decide if they should be asking their school team. But I will say, for tonight's purposes, it really is based on service delivery and progress. So for example, if during the pandemic your child did not receive services, but you as a parent decided to provide outside schooling, private tutoring, or maybe private school, and they did make tremendous progress during the pandemic, then your child really is not a good candidate for recovery or compensatory services, because they don't have a gap as a result of the school team not providing services. They've made progress. So again, this is for parents who feel their child hasn't made progress or did not receive services in the last couple of years. The last advocacy action step that I want to encourage parents to look into are all of your procedural safeguards that are available to you. And there are many. I'm going to go through a couple of the ones that I believe are critically important for parents, but many parents don't even realize that there are quite a few procedural safeguards that are there to help them advocate for their student who has disabilities. And many times this is, when we used to meet in person, this would be the thick packet of papers, so that was stapled, and it was in a variety of different colors, and just kind of pushed across the table to parents to say, here's kind of your procedural safeguards, please initial that you received them, and parents would kind of file this away along with all of their other child student information. But these procedural safeguards can actually make quite a difference when you're trying to advocate for your own child and get certain changes. So one of the procedural safeguards that I like to make sure all parents are familiar with is the prior written notice, or what is commonly referred to as the PWN document. And this is a school created document, and it really is put in place to kind of track decision making for students who have disabilities. So for example, anytime a school district is proposing to initiate something for a student with a disability. Maybe they're proposing to evaluate, or they're proposing to implement an IEP, or they're proposing to change something for a student with disabilities. Like maybe they're going to change their service hours, or maybe they're going to change their placement from general education to a special education setting, or anytime they're proposing to remove anything. Maybe they're saying that the child no longer meets the eligibility criteria, and they want to propose that they remove all of your child's special education services. They are required to document this in the prior written notice document. And so many parents don't even realize that this document exists. Some school teams do a great job and they actually include the prior written notice document in the proposed IEP. But for our purposes, we want you as parents to know this is an important document to ask for if you don't receive it after eligibility meetings, IEP meetings, any type of disciplinary meetings. If you go to disciplinary meetings about your child, you always want to get your prior written notice. And if you don't receive it, we want parents to feel comfortable to ask for it. And I also want to share that a prior written notice document has about 7 different components that it's supposed to include. So it's not just supposed to be a yes or a no. Parent asked for this, school district said no. It's actually supposed to include many different points. So your prior written notice document should say, what is the action that you are asking for, or that the school district is proposing to initiate, modify, or change or remove? And then it's supposed to list the data that was considered as part of that proposal. It's supposed to also list any other factors that were considered as part of that decision making. And again, all of this should be outlined. And if there's anything else that parents want from these school meetings and they're asking for it and school teams are just saying no, we want parents to feel confident to say, okay, I hear that you're not in agreement with that. Could you please record my request and your refusal in the prior written notice document? And that will also let the school team know that, 1, you're familiar with what that document is, and 2, that you realize they're not just supposed to be a one and done, you ask and it's refused, or you ask and they say yes. Even for all decisions, all of these criteria are supposed to be included. So you want to make sure as you are asking for things for your child, that's why we believe you're going to want to have your data, you're going to want to have your rationale, you're going to want to have reasoning to back up the request so that all of that can be included in the prior written notice document. The other very important procedural safeguard is audio recording. So many parents do not realize that they have the right to audio record all of the eligibility meetings, the IEP meetings, and as I was just mentioning, any type of disciplinary meetings that they might have to attend on behalf of their student who has disabilities. So it has been interesting during the pandemic when everyone is meeting virtually like we are tonight. Some school teams have said, we're not allowed to audio record because we're also visually recording as well. And the provision does not allow for visual recording. So as a advocacy practice, we tell parents, just let the school team know about 24 hours out that it is your intention to audio record, and let them know that you also want to keep the cameras on during the meeting. So you're giving them advance notice in the hope that they can get an external audio recorder so that they don't have to turn off the cameras in order to audio record your child's meeting. Because many parents have found it frustrating to go to a virtual meeting and be told, no, you can't audio record if everyone leaves their cameras on. And we certainly want to help you navigate that challenge as well. So if parents do disagree with the evaluation or any evaluation that's conducted by a school district, one of the procedural safeguards that exist for parents is the right to ask for an independent educational evaluation, or what is commonly referred to as an IEE. And this, again, is really important for parents to know because it gives you a second opinion by an outside clinician who meets the criteria that's been defined by the school district. It can give you a second opinion on what they believe your child's strengths, disabilities, weaknesses, and needs are, and can often include even more recommendations than what you're getting from a school evaluation. So if you have had a school evaluation for any reason, whether it's a psychological, educational, speech language, occupational therapy evaluation, even assistive technology. For any evaluation that the school district conducts, if parents disagree with the findings of that evaluation, we encourage them to request an independent educational evaluation from their school district. And if that is approved, then the school district will allow them to get that second opinion at county expense, which means that the school district will pay for that outside private provider to evaluate your child. And the only caveat that I want to share with the parents here tonight is that if a school district is paying for the evaluation under the context of an IEE, they are entitled to a copy of that evaluation. So there's only a couple of cases where I've met with parents and they say, we'd like to get a private evaluation. We're not really sure if we want to share it with the school district or not. If that is the case, then you may not wish to ask for that second opinion under an IEE. You may just wish to go off and get that second opinion on your own. But if you're comfortable with a school district receiving a copy and you would like for them to help get you that second opinion, an IEE can be a very important procedural safeguard for parents. Also, consent is something that we still find a lot of confusion exist for families and parents when they're advocating for students who have disabilities. And when we're talking about consent, we're talking about consent for an evaluation, consent to implement an IEP, consent to the components of the IEP, meaning what are the goals, what are the services, what are the accommodations? Are you as a parent in agreement with everything that the school district is proposing? And if you are not, you have a couple of consent options. Parents can give full consent, of course, to implement the IEP or to do the evaluation, or they can withhold consent, they can revoke consent, and in some cases they can give partial consent. So many parents do not realize that all of these consent options exist for them when they are working with school teams and trying to make appropriate decisions for their child. There are also, of course, dispute resolution options that exist as a procedural safeguard for parents. So when we're talking about dispute resolution options, what is outlined under the procedural support is that parents have the right to file a state complaint if they're not in agreement with the school district's decision making. They have the option of requesting mediation with the school district. Now, mediation is going to be voluntary on both parties' parts, but parents have the right to request it. And parents also have the right to file a due process claim or to request a due process hearing with a school district if they are not in agreement with the school's decision making and really believe that their child is not being offered a free and appropriate public education. And while it is not part of the formal dispute resolution options, in Virginia, parents also have the option of requesting what's called a facilitated IEP meeting if they would like a state facilitator to come and facilitate their IEP meeting with their school district. And sometimes that can be really helpful if you feel like the meetings are not productive, or maybe relationships are kind of starting to fray and you want someone from outside the school district to facilitate and move along and really lead to a productive discussion about your child. So I'm also often asked as an advocate, when should parents really consider making the decision to bring an advocate onto their child's team? And I've just listed a couple of the reasons here. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but I like to say, if you know, whether it's from your own parent observation or a private evaluation, that your child has a disability and that it's severe, and you've asked the school district to find your child eligible, and you've repeatedly been told, no, it's not going to happen, I think that definitely warrants a conversation and potentially some type of an engagement with a professional advocate. Parents often, share with us that they feel very nervous about going to IEP meetings. They don't know what they should say, what they can agree to, not agree to. So if you also don't feel like you're being heard at your child's meeting, or that all of your concerns are being, addressed appropriately, I think that's a good reason to bring in an advocate who can help you accomplish that. And oftentimes we will see children who have disabilities start to be disciplined or to develop a behavioral record because the school district is not really realizing that it isn't so much the child has a behavior condition, it's that unsupported or unidentified disabilities might be causing that behavior, which actually is, part of what happened with my own son. I watched his behavior deteriorate, and it really wasn't a behavioral concern. It was kind of a manifestation of unidentified, unsupported disabilities that we later found out were pretty profound. And of course, if you're, as we say, if you are constantly fighting with your child, maybe they're refusing to go to school, maybe they are having a lot of somatic symptoms, like they're saying my stomach hurts, I don't feel well, I get headaches in school, or they're always in the nurse's office, or they're always in the bathroom, or when you're trying to do homework with them, it's taking hours and they're ending up in tears under your table, that is also probably a good time to reach out and have a conversation with an advocate. And I know this year, in all of the work that I've been doing, many parents are frustrated at how long the process has taken. Some folks have been waiting for months to have evaluations done during the pandemic. And what I like to say is, whenever we are working for a child who has disabilities, I think we have to keep in mind, this is a marathon and not a sprint. And that while, my team and I are delighted with the results we can get in a relatively short period of time, if you are a parent of a child who has disabilities, you're going to be advocating for them a minimum of once a year for every year that they are in school. And so if you have a young child, you're going to be advocating for them, for 10 or more years with a school team. So it really isn't going to be, one conversation, one meeting, one IEP. It's going to be, as a parent, you constantly kind of looking for and assessing, have they captured all of my child's needs? Is my child actually making meaningful progress? Is there anything that has changed as a result of our home life or my child's development or the pandemic? And this is a constant conversation. And so I want to, manage expectations in here and say, it is definitely not something that you have to do on a daily basis, but just know it's not a sprint, as we say. It is a marathon. And again, the good news is, while it is not easy, it is absolutely worth it and very rewarding. And even in this unprecedented time, which feels like it's been oversaid, we have continued to see children who are getting their needs identified, getting appropriate intervention that is delivered with fidelity. We are seeing them close their reading and spelling gap. We are seeing them make progress. We are seeing them move from special education settings back into more of a general education setting when they're ready. And so I just want to give everyone a bit of hope and know that it absolutely is possible. And, I think that for all of us who are parents, when we see that things are coming together for our child, not only is it worth it for them, but it's worth it for us, because we now have a certain peace of mind. We now sleep a little bit better at night, and we're not fighting over homework or fighting with our spouse or our partner about our child. And so you really do have a certain degree of harmony that's kind of restored to your home. And I know for myself and my family, that was absolutely worth it. So for those of you who have been listening to all of this and maybe wondering, yeah, this sounds like me, or I would like to, get a little bit of help navigating this whole process, I just want to quickly share that we do help families in two different ways. We offer hands-on direct advocacy services where we go with families to school meetings. And then we also have a parent advocacy coaching program that is starting up at the end of April, where we actually teach parents who want to advocate on their own. We teach them my framework, and we go through all of kind of the key knowledge points, the critical tools. We give them templates and resources so that they can hopefully feel empowered to advocate on their own a little bit more effectively. And I will say too, that when many of our clients reached out to us, they would often say, I didn't even know what I was looking for. I just knew that I needed help. I didn't know what kind of help that I needed. And again, if this is you and you're sitting here and some of this is sounding too familiar, or you've been worried about some of these situations for your own child, feel free to use this QR code or visit our website. We do offer complimentary discovery calls. We're happy to answer a couple of quick questions for you if that's all that you need, and to talk further about, the kind of help you're looking for and whether or not we would be a good match for you. And here is all of our contact information. We also, as our commitment to the dyslexia community, we do push out on a regular basis informational emails. Those come out weekly. We do monthly blogs. We do events like tonight. We do other informational webinars for parents, because we are well aware that too many parents right now are suffering in pain, trying to figure out what to do for their children. Too many children have needs that are going unmet. So we are trying as a company to do all that we can to share free information and resources for families in need. We're also, I should say, on Facebook and LinkedIn. So thank you for coming tonight and for hanging in through all of this presentation. And Susan and Tristan, I'm happy to answer questions if we have some.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lorraine. I'll look in the chat box and see.
And I just wanted to let you know, Mary had to go, but she said it was very helpful, and thank you very much.
Oh, of course.
Very good.
So I can't actually see the chat, Tristan. I don't know if we do have any questions.
There's nothing in there. Just people are saying thank you.
Okay.
I'll stop the recording in case anybody wanted to ask something that they didn't
Sure.
want recorded.